Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey. Today we continue our series breaking down Oklahoma's football roster with wide receivers. We've gone through quarterbacks, we've gone through running backs, now we reach wide receivers. And Jason, this is a position with huge question marks outside of Sterling Shepard, especially with the transition in offense with Lincoln Riley coming aboard as the offensive coordinator, and also coaching with the way that it's split up. Cale Gundy now the inside wide receivers coach. There's been some shakeup on the offensive staff.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because this was a position group that really struggled last year with all the blame that was put on the quarterbacks, and rightfully so in many ways. But the receivers weren't very good last year either, and they didn't do anything to help those quarterbacks out, particularly after Sterling Shepard went down. So with Sterling Shepard fully healthy, bring in Dede Westbrook, the junior college transfer, and Deron Neal shown some flashes with some new coaching, a new offensive system. There's potential there for this group to be really good next year.
Yeah, there's little doubt about that with Sterling Shepard if he's able to stay healthy. Like you said, Westbrook. There's some intriguing names. Jeffrey Mead, who played a lot early in the season last year and then sort of faded away. I think he's a guy that a lot of people expected this year to be the one where he started contributing. Mark Andrews is an intriguing name at inside wide receiver, tight end type of spot. There's Dahu Green. I don't know that how much he'll contribute this year, but certainly an intriguing prospect. They signed a class that at least has a chance to contribute reasonably quickly, given their struggles at that position a year ago.
Yeah, they do. To me, Westbrook is the guy who I think seems to be the strongest candidate for a guy who's going to be able to come in and make an impact. I think the fact that he was here in the spring probably helps with that. Another guy who was here in the spring, John Humphrey, is a really, he's got sprinter speed. He's a guy who could, there's a reasonable expectation that he could step in and do something this year. Because of how bad this group was last year, there's a lot of opportunity for guys. A guy that I think is incredibly talented, who didn't really do much last year, is Micaiah Quick. And, I think I completely forgot to mention him at the beginning, but he's a guy who I think there's probably some high expectations for. So there's a lot of guys who could make a difference, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to do that in this offense.
Who do you think out of this group benefits the most from Lincoln Riley's system and the way that the passing game works in the air raid?
I'm gonna say Deron Neal, because we know that he's a talented guy. For whatever reason, it's never quite materialized. He was the second leading receiver last year. He had some good moments, but once Shepard went down and he had his opportunity to really step up and become the guy, he didn't do it. I don't think, you might correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't have a catch in the Bedlam game, right?
I believe that is correct.
That was a game where one catch could have made the difference in that game. One first down at the end of the game could have made that difference. So, but to me, with new coaching, with the fact that they can be specialized inside and outside receivers, if Deron Neal can really be specialized there in that outside receiver spot, get some really good coaching from Dennis Simmons, there's a good chance that he could come out and have a really good year, particularly now that this offense is going back to the air raid. He might have some more opportunities, than he's had in the past couple of years. So, to me, I think Deron Neal still has a lot of upside, even though he's going into his senior year. There's a lot of reason to believe that he's still capable of really having a big year. But
by the way, Deron Neal did not have a catch in Bedlam last year.
And like I said, one catch would have made the difference in that game.
Yeah, and I actually was going to go with Deron Neal, but we'll switch it up a little bit. Well, it's not the first time, but that's what I get for asking the question. I think Mark Andrews is a guy who has a chance to fit in really well in this offense with his size. He's sort of a, like I mentioned, a hybrid, can play, tight, can play out a little bit, and he's a guy that I think in this system, with what Lincoln Riley does in the passing game with the air raid, I think he's a guy that can be a big piece. They're not going to have a true tight end. They're not going to have even, a Blake Bell type can be that big bruiser type. They certainly don't have anybody like the tight ends they had in the heyday of that position under Bob Stoops. But I think Mark Andrews can fit in really well and has a chance to make big plays for this team.
Yeah, Mark Andrews is I think he's going to be really good. He was a guy who, when he was being recruited, and you talk to some of the guys who cover recruiting, on a full-time basis, they say that when he was being recruited, he was not interested in being a tight end. He was a receiver, and he was recruited that way. But last year, during his redshirt year, they switched him over, and there's just been so much positive said about him throughout the spring that you really do expect that he could be in line for a big year.
I think we have to talk about Sterling Shepard a little bit more broadly than we have before. Shepard was just fantastic for most of last year until he went down, and that really exposed the lack of depth outside of him at that position. But are you comfortable with Sterling Shepard and his health entering this year?
I think so. I think that he'll be back healthy. I mean, last year was just he just never could quite fully recover, and he kept trying to go, and he just wasn't ever 100%. Even in the Clemson game, I don't think he was 100%. But all this time off, I think, has probably been good for him. It's not like he had to do a lot in the spring. I mean, they didn't need to see a whole lot from him. They know what he's capable of. So yeah, I mean, I think that he'll be fine next year and he's going to have to be, because when he's healthy, he's a difference maker. I mean, if he hadn't got hurt, when he did, I mean, he essentially missed the second half of the season last year. And if they'd have had him, number one, I think they would have won Bedlam. I think they lost by 30 to Baylor, and so it's hard to say that one player would make a difference. But if one player could make a difference, it would be him, because when the offense got stagnant, he could have made a play and made a difference. And before that game got out of hand, not only from a team perspective, the difference that he could have made, or the accolades he could have picked up. I mean, I think he would have been a legitimate Biletnikoff candidate and an All-American candidate if he hadn't got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, even in the two losses that he was a part of,
it wasn't his fault.
Against TCU and Kansas State, he keeps them in both of those games and gives them a chance, if not for a couple of plays, kicks, and turnovers, dooming the Sooners. But in those two games, a combined 22 catches for let's see, what is it? Quick math, 412 yards.
Yeah, I mean, incredible.
Yeah, and that's what he was. He went down early in the game against Iowa State after a 46-yard reception there. Only had one catch for 13 yards the rest of the way, and that was in the bowl game against Clemson. But I think there's no doubt he would have made a difference in the Bedlam game for sure. Played a little bit in that game, had one rush, but if he's able to play and be consistent, it's hard for me to not imagine them picking up a first down there in the fourth quarter when they desperately needed one.
Yeah. Again, one catch from somebody would have made a difference in that game. One catch.
Which has sort of been the theme of this edition of the podcast with the wide receivers.
Yeah.
One guy needs to make a play, and nobody was able to do that. Out of the guys that we haven't really touched on much, outside of D.D. Westbrook, Sterling Shepard, and Mark Andrews and Deron Neal, who's somebody else that you think can have a significant impact on this offense this season?
Well, I've already sort of said it, but I think Micaiah Quick is absolutely talented enough and has enough skills to make a big impact. And he could potentially be one of the top three guys on the team if he's he obviously didn't play in the spring game, so it's sort of easy to forget about him. But I would definitely go with Micaiah Quick.
Yeah, I think Quick is certainly a guy who has a chance. I think I'm going to go with John Humphrey. I think his speed, like you mentioned, can give him an extra edge that not a whole lot of these guys have. I think Jordan Smallwood's got a chance to contribute as well, but I think Humphrey's a guy who his skill set works pretty well in this offense, and he's got a chance to make some big plays.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the wide receivers, Jason, anything that we haven't touched on that we should with wide receivers?
Well, one guy who I think could have made more of an impact, at least early in the season, would be Jordan Smallwood. He had the injury, but it sounds like he'll be back at some point during the season. So once he's healthy, I think he'll have a shot.
One other thing, how much do you think the move of Cale Gundy from running backs, and we've known how successful he's been at recruiting running backs during his tenure at OU, but from running backs to inside wide receivers, do you think that'll boost wide receiver recruiting?
It could, and they need it. I mean, that was a big problem, the recruiting, and that's crazy because Jay Norvell had this reputation of being such a good recruiter, but truthfully, he was not landing big time guys, and the guys that he was getting were not working out. And so, Cale Gundy, when he's recruiting running backs, he obviously had some great hits. He had a few misses, but everybody has a few misses. I do think that he'll. I think that could definitely help.
Yeah, and I think with him, it's important too to note that he's gotten 5-star guys that have been really good, and he's brought in guys who weren't as highly thought of that turns out were pretty darn good as well. Yes, he's missed on some, but overall, an extremely good track record for Cale Gundy.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. You can check us out next week for another edition of the podcast. Until then, you can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.